The broadcast is now starting.
So team, welcome to the CSDT3 and the JPACT 5 orientation session 2. So we just had one orientation session day before yesterday. So primarily, so what we started doing in the orientation session 1 was that we kind of try to understand what is it's basically trying to get a big picture of what you're going to learn from this overall program. So we started putting that in a Google Drive. So this is a document that we have started. So basically, I gave a picture of what we're going to do in this is it's a manual testing sessions, which is purely uh, theoretical and trying to understand the various concepts around software development methodologies. Where does the roles and responsibilities of QA come into picture? And then what are your primary deliverables, like understanding the user scenarios or user stories in Agile, coming up with the test scenarios and test cases which are like valid, invalid, positive, negative, not just for functional testing, but for various other testing techniques like load testing, performance testing, security testing, accessibility testing, right? GUI testing, database testing. So there are about 35 techniques we have. It's not that you need to be master in each one of them, but you need to definitely know them when you go for an interview, because of course, 70 to 80% of your time goes in functional testing if you're below 3 to 5 years of experience. But after that, you will try to get into more into one of the specialized. Like maybe if you're interested in security, you go towards security. If you're interested in load performance side, you'll go towards that. Otherwise, functional testing is always there. 70 to 80% of your time goes in functional testing. So we'll come up with the different test scenarios for live applications that are getting developed at Workasa Inc., which is the related company for ITeLearn. Again, Karthik is the founder and CEO for that. So we have about 35 odd people in Hyderabad center, and then we have people in Los Angeles who are consistently working on various applications and products. So we can actually start testing on them and provide the feedback to it. And so with that way, there will be about few sessions on the pure manual testing. Again, when you find an issue or a defect or a bug, how do you log them? What kind of information you have to provide, and how it goes through different phases of life cycle. We call it as a defect life cycle. Like when you log a bug, what you should do, what are all the information that you have to provide. So all that we will get to experience manually. Then we will look at one of the test management tool. Like as I said, the immediate previous batch I did with the HP ALM tool. So this batch we will try to do with the Jira, so that you can get to see both the tools which are very popular in the market. Again, whatever we have discussed in the whole manual testing, completely through tool, like creating a user story, creating tasks out of it in your sprint, estimating the tasks, allocating the tasks to the different people, writing the test cases against the user story, tracing them. Generally what happens is that for a better coverage, we'll always do this from the testing side. Is that uh, we call it as a traceability matrix. So one, in the olden days, we used to take requirements like requirement 1 to requirement n. If you have number of requirements and what kind of test cases that you're coming up with, let's say test case 1, and you have number of test cases that you have written, whether you are really covering everything or not. If you put into a sheet or a matrix, that will be very clear. Okay, for requirement 1, I have written test case 1. For requirement 2, I have written test case 2, or requirement n, I have written test case n. So this way you are confident that you are covering all the requirements or user stories. So the same kind of a traceability you can do within the tool, whether it is an HP ALM or Jira, so that at any point of the time when you find a test case, you will know what is the requirement against it, or when you find a requirement, you know what are the test cases against it. And we'll try to even do the traceability between the test cases and defects also. Like when you find the defects after execution, so which defect I found for which test case. So we'll try to do that kind of a traceability also. So all that is possible in the test management tools. Then we look at the test case template that is going to be used, the importance of the template, and then what are all the information that you have to provide when you're writing a test case. Same case with when we log a defect, what are the information that you have to provide, what is defect triage meeting is all about, who will be part of it, and how do you decide the severity and priority of a bug. Like when you find a bug, not every bug is of same criticality. Like we have a high critical, we generally call them as urgent, and then we have high, medium, low, and same case with priority. So understanding all those things, totally 10 sessions, which is both manual and the using the test management tool. So that's what we're going to do, and kind of detailed out in the orientation session one. What we're going to do, we'll start with beginning of the testing. uh, I think I've drafted here, yeah. Understanding software development methodologies, different testing types or techniques, and then go into different types. Then execution on a live application, typically on a web application. Then categorizing a defect. That's when the manual, you'll be actually getting a complete picture of what is manual testing and how to do manual testing. Then what we'll try to do is we'll understand what is actually the automation testing, the need of automation testing, when we will be actually going for an automation testing. Like I detailed out in the orientation session one also, that when your product is going into multiple versions, there is a good amount of regression testing that you're going to do. Nothing but you're going to repeat the similar testing that you have already done on the previous version of it, because the code changes that are happening in the latest version. People who have not attended orientation session one, I would strongly recommend to watch that as well as today's one before we actually start getting into detailed training. So when a product is going into multiple releases, uh, when the code change happens, either when we add a new enhancements or modify existing enhancements, we need to do something called impact analysis. And like, let's say in version 1 we have already done 500 test cases. Now we are working on version 2, and that version 2 has about 100 test cases. But it is not enough if we do only that 100 test cases testing, but we should also be doing some amount of testing from the previous 500 test cases also. And that decides, or that depends on the impact analysis. Impact analysis. Okay, so Neeta has a question. Is performance testing is a part of this training? From a manual testing point of view, we'll talk about various different techniques like functional, non-functional, everything. I'll even explain you how to do a couple of test cases writing. But if you want to be completely master in performance testing alone, that is not part of this. Like I told you, in the first 3 years, 0 to 3 years of your experience, you need to know all these. But what majorly you're going to perform is like 70 to 80% of the time in functional testing. And later, when you wanted to decide and become a master, then you will actually be choosing the tools like Load Runner or Web Load or a Neo Load or Visual Studio Test Load. So because each tool, see, there are many different testing is a big word. Like you might have heard about API testing, you might have heard about mobile testing. Each one is a different area. And then you might have heard about ETL related testing. On the data warehouse side, you might have heard about data warehouse testing itself, business warehouse testing. So and then on the games testing, right, apps testing. So each is a different area, and this, around 40-45 sessions, including both videos and the live, is to make you kind of understand the holistic picture of what is the testing world is all about, and the important tools that you're going to start with it. And then, like I've been saying in session one as well, if you know, like previously only manual testing, and even if you're an expert in manual testing, that's not enough with the kind of dynamics that are changing in the testing world. You should be really master in automation, not just again in automation development. People are expecting to be master in frameworks development, and to be part of a DevOps model, you should be able to contribute along with the developers and the operations team. You should be able to contribute to the continuous integration and continuous deployment. Like, generally what companies have a goal is that right from the day one, when the developers start checking in the code into the version control system till it goes live, companies are doing the deployments almost on a weekly basis. There are companies who are doing it on a daily basis, and your automation script should be able to automatically kicked off when the developer check in a code. So when, like, typically, anyway, this is what I definitely want to highlight in today's session is that there are various things that are going to happen when a project gets released. So the first thing that happens is, like, there are n number of developers working in the project from various locations. Let's say there are few from Singapore, few from US, few from India, and few from other countries. They all will put the code into something called Git, which is a very popular version control system. Git or GitHub. Again, we're going to see this Git or GitHub in our sessions. How to check in our automation code, how to check out the code, and then you know, along with the developers, how can we maintain our automation code? All that we're going to see. So the developers are going to maintain the code over here, and they will be given a cutoff time. Let's say if they are working on a feature by, I'm just putting some generic time that works for their client and for the overall, let's say 6 p.m., whatever the time, PST or IST works for them. By 6 p.m., everybody should complete their features and the unit testing of these features and check in the code into the GitHub. Then there will be a next step starts maybe around 7 p.m., which is all automatic. Nobody will be manually interacting this. This code will check out the latest code from the GitHub, and then it will compile and build the code. So we call it as build process. There will be a separate build engineer who will be responsible to taking care of this. But what if something goes wrong? Let's say a build fails for some reason, and that is because developer 2 from US committed some code, and that's actually failing. So the build engineer, if in today's world, again, they have an expectations that that's what exactly DevOps model. They don't need to really reach out to the developer, but they themselves should be able to fix if the fix is very simple. But if the fix is not so simple, only developer can do it, then he has to kind of call up the developer, ask him to come online, get it fixed. Because see, if this is whole thing, we call it as a pipeline, and if this pipeline breaks, immediately everybody will have an impact. Test team will have an impact, customers will have an impact, live environment will have an impact. So in the pipeline, if any step breaks, the pipeline engineer, whoever is responsible for this whole pipeline, he will call up those corresponding people, whether it is a developer or a tester, and ask him to provide the fix immediately. So let's say developer 2 has committed some code and that is actually causing a problem for the build failure. If the build engineer can fix it, he'll fix it. Otherwise, he'll call up the developer 2 come online, fix the code, check in the code again. Then again, this step, building the step will restart. Now this time, let's say it's able to properly check out, compile, build it, and then it is either generates into jar files or var files in the world of Java. And so this is one step. So once first step is completed, then what happens? All these services will be deployed onto the different environments. Let's say we have a system testing environment in which it's going to be deployed. So all these components will be deployed in system testing server In case if during the installation, if anything fails, again there will be a engineer, typically can again the build engineer itself uh, will get an email if something goes wrong, and again he will try to reach out to the corresponding person who has written that um, deployment script. If the deployment goes fine, then second step is also successful. Then we people, the QA comes into picture here. Let's say this has happened around 8 p.m. Now at around 9 p.m. QA come into picture, and what QA is supposed to do is whatever the regression automation that they have developed in Selenium or any other automation tool. For our course, we are majorly looking at Selenium, and that too it's a 3.0, which is the latest version. And if you have to look at precisely the version, we can actually look at seleniumhq.org. 3.8.1 is the one that we're going to discuss. So let me just go back. Okay. So we're going to look at the latest version of Selenium. Let's assume you have developed using certain framework, maybe keyword-driven framework, hybrid framework, or a page object model framework, or any other framework, or maybe TestNG framework. We're going to look at all of them in our session. Soon after this, I'll go into the detailed discussion of Selenium, what you're going to learn. But let's say you have already developed a Selenium script using some framework, which needs to be kicked off automatically around 9 p.m. And you as a QA engineer, test engineer, you are responsible for this step. So how all these things are going to kick off automatically? We're going to use a tool called Jenkins. Most of the organizations, as part of this continuous integration tool, they're going to use this tool called Jenkins. In the Jenkins, you can schedule any type of job. It could be a Windows command batch file. It could be a shell script. It could be a Selenium script. It could be a Java code. You can write any sort of code, and you can ask the tool to run at a particular time. So every day around 9 p.m., of course, it's not like blindly running at 9 p.m. You can make a dependency with the previous job. You will say a previous job which is run at around 8 p.m. If it gets passed, then only run my job. In case if this fails, then don't run my job, because my job also will fail. So you can make this dependency from the previous one, and the tool is intelligent in such a way that only when the previous job is successful, then this job will run. So what is our job is to start our Selenium automation scripts. Let's say you have developed a regression suite for your application, which is consisting of some 100 test cases or 200 test cases automated. So they're all going to run without your interaction. You may be actually at home, but the script will start automatically running it, and on the latest build that is being deployed on the latest server. And if there are any test cases fails, you will get a notification. Then probably you will look at or come online and see, is it because of the Selenium code failure or is it because of the build failure? If it is a build failure, then you will it can send out an email to everybody saying that, hey, today's latest build is not properly developed, so our automation is failing, and here are the test cases which are failing, and here are the issues. And somebody again from the development team can come online, look at the issues. If they can fix, they can fix. Otherwise, today's build status is like this. Let's assume if this job goes fine, then again our users will have user acceptance testing. Again, in today's world, most of the people, users, are also kind of having an automation. If at all we would have developed a keyword-driven framework, it's very simple for the users to even come up with their automation also, because we are going to do the entire framework using simple English language keywords, and they can use those keywords and write user acceptance testing automation also. If not, we're going to look at another tool called Cucumber, a part of our discussion. So that is another tool which is used for behavior driven development, and most of the business people in collaboration with engineering, that is Selenium engineers, automation engineers, will develop the Cucumber tests, uh, and let's say they can schedule that around 11 p.m. or whatever works out for them. Again, it's automatic, and that too depends on our automation results. If automation test pass, then only they can run their results, which will automatically kick off and then start testing the UAT scenarios. They would have automated some. They won't do automation of all 100 that we have done, but they might do some 30 or 40, which they will be verifying and confirm the status of the build, whether the build is of good quality or not. If anything fails again, they'll send out an email to the whole engineering team. Hey, here are our UAT cases failing, so we are not accepting this build. But if everything finds, again, this code will be deployed into production, which is a live environment. So if you look at this whole process, and sometimes we'll do a basic testing in the live also, just to ensure if everything is fine or not. So that means by midnight, whole process is completed. The next day morning, our users can actually start seeing the new features that we have developed last week or last day or last month, depending on your release cycle. And this whole process, we call it as a pipeline, or we call it as a continuous integration and continuous deployment, because you have checks at every stage. And if the check fails, then you're rejecting that previous step. The corresponding owner should come online and fix it immediately, or depending on the SLA. SLA in the sense service level agreement. Whether it is less than 24 hours, less than 48 hours, or less than 1 week. Depending on the SLA that's available, they will come and start fixing that. And part of this course, you're going to experience this entire pipeline, and especially from a QA side. How do you schedule this Jenkins scripts, and how does it kicks off automatically? How does it will send email when you do that? Before you do that, how do we actually maintain our code in Git and GitHub? How can we check in the code? How can we check out the code? What happens when we work with version control system? All those things you're going to do it. And since Java is deals with a lot of jar files, and there are so many jar files that we are going to deal in our automation. To name a few, like we'll start with JUnit jar file, testng jar file. While working with Excel sheets and all, you'll work with Apache PY jar file. While connecting to the databases, you'll work with JDBC database related jar files. There are so many jar files that you're going to work. So and they come up with latest versions every week and every month. You can find all kind of jar files in a repository called Maven Repository. Maven is the free source again that will maintain all your jar files that you need. For example, if you want JUnit, you'll find the JUnit jar file here. If you want testng, you'll find testng jar file here. Any jar file that you think of used in the Java, you can find it from this MVN repository. So that's one of the reason we're going to look at a tool called Apache Maven. We're going to look at Apache Maven tool, and we'll provide all these jar dependencies in a file called pom.xml. And when you provide in the pom.xml, what will happen is that if you don't have the required version of the jar file in your project, it will automatically go to this Maven repository that I have just showed you, download and make it available to your project. So we'll look at Apache Maven, we'll look at Jenkins, we'll look at Cucumber tool, we'll look at robot framework, which is majorly developed using keyword driven framework. Apart from, we develop data driven framework, keyword driven framework, page object model framework. Page object model, or people call it as page factory. page factory in the it's one of the design factory in Java. So we're going to use that for developing the framework. Apart from that, there is a popular TestNG framework that most of the companies use it, which is part of the Selenium TestNG. So we look at that. In a way, let me give you, before I go into the details of overall testing, to kind of explain you what are the different topics that you're going to learn, and to get a complete picture on the automation side. Anyone has any questions on the topic that I've just talked for the last 15 minutes or 10 minutes? Anyone has any questions? Okay, yeah, sequence of topics. Yeah, I definitely try to highlight uh, major important things which will give you a confidence of what you're going to learn. But definitely, I'm going to show you the complete sequence of topics what you're going to learn. Okay, when does Cucumber come into picture? Yeah, so Cucumber has a specific purpose apart from the regular core automation team or a QA team developing automation scripts. If the business wants to come and help you in coming up with business scenarios, so we are going to use something called behavior driven development. Again, part of our manual discussions, part of the before starting Cucumber, we'll understand what is test driven development model is all about, acceptance test driven model is all about, behavior driven development model is all about, and that will set the context for Cucumber. So in behavior driven development, what happens? Developers, testers, PM, or product owner in today's world, so they will work with the business people and come up with all the business scenarios in a simple English language called Gherkin language. In Cucumber, it's called Gherkin language, and they will write simple English language scenarios, and those scenarios we will convert into Selenium automation. If you just want to get a little bit more idea, so this is the Cucumber website. So they will write it like this. The feature that they wanted to, okay, can I erase all this before that, or if you're able to see, that's fine. Somebody wants to refund an item which they bought it from an online. Let's assume it's an e-commerce application. So I bought, let's say, a micro. Okay, I'll erase it. And the scenario is that he wants to return a faulty microwave. So he ordered for a microwave through online, and he bought it for, let's say, $100, and then he wanted to return it. So this is a scenario, and our business people are going to write it in simple English language like this. Jeff returns a faulty microwave given the condition that he has bought a microwave for $100 and he has a receipt. So these are like preconditions for performing the task. And then he returns a microwave, and then he should be refunded with $100. So business people will help us with simple features like this, and then we are going to convert this into a Selenium automation. So when you run this feature file, it will actually run the Selenium code in the core Java. When I say Java code or whatever the code, in fact Python, whatever, and then it's going to execute the code. So like this, simple features will be written in Cucumber, and we are going to automate that. Do we cover OOPS concepts in this training? So not to the extent which are required for a developer, but to an extent what we need from the core Java programming point of view, like definitely understanding what is a class, what is an object. uh, you know a class is a collection of member variables and methods. Understanding member variables, methods, understanding inheritance concept, understanding abstraction. These are the different things that we are going to look at. And what is method overloading, because we're going to write multiple different methods with the same name, but the arguments are going to be different. So what is method overloading or functional overloading, we call it as. So we look at some of them to an extent what is needed from a QA point of view. All right. So if I go back and have to explain you the whole, apart from the manual testing that we just discussed, what we're going to look at before we switch to the automation, we'll understand the need of automation, why we should really be doing an automation, and when you should only consider automation and when you should not consider automation. All those scenarios we'll discuss, because automation implementing is not just for the sake of implementing. You need to get the return on the investment. Even though the tool is free, like previously for last, I would say from 2000, I started my career at around 2002. From 2002 to 2012 or so, uh, UFT or QTP was very, very popular, and it was the only tool in the market, I would say, which is very competitive to other tools like IBM Rational Robo, Microsoft Visual Studio Test Suite, and all that. So that time, the cost of the tool was also need to be considered. But here, Selenium is an open source; anybody can get it for free and use it. But even though there is no cost for you, uh, what you need to consider, because development of this automation will take time, and when you are spending time in development of the automation, are you going to really get the return on the investment that you are making or not? So we need to consider those aspects, and then we should really be considering whether we should do an automation or not. So we'll look at those aspects in one of the session, and then we'll get into a detailed introduction about the Selenium, like to talk about currently what we have is Selenium 3.0, but before that we had 2.0, and the first one was like 1.0, which was introduced around, I would say, 10 years back. But just that the people were not very familiar with that. Um, we're not aware of it. But for the last 5 years, it's pretty much popular. So then there are different components to it. One is the Selenium IDE, which is Integrated Development Environment, which will help you to simply do recording and playback, and the same code that you're going to get in the plain HTML, you can actually convert into any programming language that you want, because Selenium works with various languages: Java, Python, C Sharp, Ruby on Rails. So we'll look at how we actually convert that code into different formats. But for remaining 30-35 sessions, discussion is totally on the Java side of it, because that's what most of the people look for it and most of the job openings. But if somebody is interested to learn even with Python or Ruby or C Sharp, the IDE tool will help you converting the code from plain HTML into those corresponding languages. And any automation that you deal with it, you're going to work with certain application, and that application will have different controls. Controls are locators. For example, if I open a website, you will see a web page, you will see some links there, you'll see some text box, radio button, push button. There will be some HTML tables in that, web tables in that. You'll see um, some scroll bars, right? And you'll see simple single line text box, multi-line text box, all those things. So basically, your experience is like, or when will you be confident, is when we actually get to work on various controls of that. So the question arises is like, how does automation will identify those different controls, different locators? How does, whether it is a QTP or UFT or a Selenium or any other tool for that matter? Generally, what happens is that when the developer developing the application, when the developer is actually developing the application, let's say there is a web table here, and there is a text box here, and there is a button here. The step is that you will enter some order number and click on display, and it will display some order details, let's say in a table. If you have these kind of a simple controls, while developing, your developer will provide certain properties. to this particular text box. The what is a class type of this control? Everything is called locator. This is called locator. This is called locator. This is called locator. Page is called locator. Locator, or uh, people call it as control or object. Okay, so different objects will have different properties. Similarly, this text box also will have property like name. What is the class type of this property? What is the height of this, width of this, the coordinates of this, whether it is enabled or disabled. So there are different properties. And same thing with the table. This HTML table also will have certain properties. It'll have like number of rows, number of columns. In HTML, they are represented by like tr, td. So, and when you have these other different controls, what happens with Selenium is that it'll identify your locators with different mechanisms. Like Selenium can identify almost in minimum of 8 ways a locator. It can identify with ID. The best thing that development team can do, for if QA and the development team is working in collaboration, they should actually put an ID for every control, a unique ID for every control, and we can identify that locator with using the ID and automate it. There are various advantages to it, because especially when your product or application goes into multiple languages, you don't need to take the name or a label of that. For example, if the label of this is, let's say, order number ONO, it may not be the same when you go to French, or when you go to German language, or when you go to Chinese language. So then your automation becomes more complex, because you have identified with the text. Then it will fail when the settings are changed to Germany. But if the automation is identified with an ID, using an automation ID, the ID is going to be same whether your language is in English or German or Japan or French. So the best thing to do is using ID, but it is not practically possible that every developer will follow that and put an ID. Or you might be automating a product which is already developed and there are no IDs for it. So, but if you have an ID, that is the first preference. If not, then we'll go with something like name, and then there is a class name. If it is a link, we'll have a link text, partial link text. Otherwise, every HTML tag, every HTML object will have an HTML tag. We'll go with the HTML tag and other combination of the properties. So the concept here is that your Selenium should identify the locator in a unique way. For that, whether it is one property or more than one property, you combine and try to write the code so that it will always identify it uniquely. But otherwise, in web applications, we use something called XPath, and that's going to be definitely make you identify the locator in a unique way. So we'll look at various examples on how do we do with all these locator identifications with ID, name, class name, link text, partial link text, XPath, CSS, all those things. So then, after spending few sessions on Selenium IDE, we'll come into the WebDriver. WebDriver using Eclipse IDE, Java Eclipse IDE. We'll start automating. We'll first go in a very step by step, like how do we install the Eclipse, or before that, how do you install Java? Then how do you install Eclipse? How do you configure Eclipse with working for WebDriver? What are the different jar files that you have to download, and then you have to add it to your project? So all that we'll do, and then we'll start writing simple programs in Java first, and then we'll go into Selenium WebDriver. Then again we'll look at so here we did with IDE, locator identification. Here we do with WebDriver, write examples using ID, name, class name, CSS, XPath, link text, partial link text, etc. And then we'll create various examples for text box, list box, radio button, check button, links, push buttons, etc. Then there are different commands that the WebDriver will provide on the browser. Like if I'm in a particular page, how can I see the title of the page? How can I know how many links are there in the page? How can I see the source code of the page? How can I navigate back? How can I navigate forward? So all those different commands. And then we'll look at the synchronization point of view. Most of the time, automation fails for the reason that uh, your automation code and your application navigation are not in sync. Either your application is, when you click on certain link, right, either it is opening too slow, and whereas your automation is going to the next line immediately, so the next control it's not able to find. So there will be a lot of sync issues. So we'll talk about what is implicit wait, explicit wait, and how to do that. How to identify all the links in a web page if you are given. So not to exaggerate, but what can happen a lot of times, people will ask you to write certain snippets of the code in the interview. They'll give you a paper and pen and say, hey, can you write a simple code in identifying all the links on the web page or all the text box on a web page? Or so otherwise also you will definitely have a test case requirement that, when I open my application homepage, it should have 10 different links, and whether all the 10 links are working or not, you will automate that and see that. So not just about links, how do we identify buttons, pages, all those things. And then we will look at how do we read and write the data from Excel files using Apache POI files. And this will lay the foundation for developing a data-driven framework as well as for the keyword-driven framework. Then we look at how do we work with different alerts. Like, in web applications, you will see a lot of dynamic alerts coming up, right? Or pop-ups coming up, maybe advertisement one, or maybe a confirmation from you that you really want to proceed, or you want to cancel, you want to delete. So those kind of pop-ups you will be getting it. It's slightly complex in Selenium. How do you take care of that? Because you are actually in a web page and you have to switch from that web page to that alert window. And then once you change the focus to the alert window, then you can take the action, what you want to do, whether you want to accept the alert or whether you want to dismiss the alert, or you want to, sometimes you get an alert which requires you to enter password again, and then you want to enter the password. So you can take all those actions. And then we look at how do we work with handling windows, dynamic windows that comes up, working with frames. Your web application is could be divided into multiple parts called HTML frames. So how do we work with those frames, iframes, work with HTML tables or web tables, right? And then there is a action class in Selenium. So we want to look at how do we work with action class. And then we can perform series of actions using this action class. How do we take screenshot? And this will help because if something goes wrong, you want to take a screenshot, because see, when your automation runs, let's say immediately after development, you will run your automation multiple times, and if it is going to fail, you'll make the fix. But once your automation is fully developed, like I told you, you're going to simply schedule it in the Jenkins and you will be at home. And when the automation is running, if something goes wrong, you will not be able to see because you're not in front of the computer to see the execution. So what you can do, you can take a screenshot of wherever your test case gets failed, or if you want, you can take a screenshot for every page and then dump it into one folder. Next day morning when you come back, you can just simply open the folder and check all the pages of your website are correct or not. So that help in a lot of ways, taking the screenshot. So, and then during the actually it's not in this order, but I would definitely talk about JUnit somewhere way before. So we look at what is a JUnit framework, how do we create a JUnit test cases. Then we look at there are different, the another framework which is competitor to the JUnit, or which actually better than JUnit, is that TestNG framework, which a lot of people uses. From our Selenium automation side, there are many people use TestNG framework. So we'll spend about good 4 sessions on TestNG. understanding the different annotations, how do we pass parameters, how do we create data-driven test. I think I've not mentioned one important thing called listeners. How do we work with listeners, TestNG listeners? So all that we're going to look at in the TestNG framework. And TestNG is not just for um, Windows operating system. It can work on different operating systems, so you can get to see that. And it works for different browsers, not just like Internet Explorer or Chrome or only Firefox. So we'll work with different browsers as well. So we'll create scripts for different browsers. And then there is a very important concept called Selenium Grid, which helps in parallel execution. Let's say you have developed 100 test cases automation, but the same thing you need to run on Windows operating system with Internet Explorer, and then you need to run another Windows. Let's say first one is on Windows 8 with IE 10, second one is like Windows 10 with IE 11, other one is like maybe with Linux with a different browser, maybe like Chrome. So you have different combinations to run it. And if you have to go run sequentially, let's say all your 100 test cases takes about 2 hours. And if I have to run, first one will take 2 hours, then second one will take 2 hours, then 2 hours, then 2 hours. Look, I might need 10 hours to complete my testing. But instead of that, we can use Selenium Grid, which will help in parallel execution. And we can finish the whole testing in 2 hours. We can parallelly run all of them with the different operating systems and browsers, and then we can complete the whole testing in 2 hours. So we'll look at we're going to look at the latest grid, which is grid 2.0, and then we'll see the parallel testing. And then of course talking about how can I connect to databases from my Selenium using JDBC, and how can we do database testing. Then there is something called page object model or page factory, which is very popular in Selenium. So we're going to spend time on that to create the test cases. Of course, throughout each example, each of these examples will introduce you to different concepts in Java. Like how do you declare variables, how do you declare constants, how do you write if conditions, how do you write switch case statements, how do you write for loop, how do you write while loop, and then how do you work with different data types like integers, strings, etc. So apart from that, we have done some time back core Java videos. So you can actually watch those videos to get a complete picture of the Java language itself. But when I do it on all these sessions, you will get the complete picture of the required amount of Java for a Selenium point of view. So we're going to spend a good development on the data-driven framework, keyword-driven framework, hybrid framework, and then there is a log4j for logging. See, logging is very important when you do the development, whether you do the logging for every step or for the failure cases. Every step has an information, failure step when the test case fails, or whenever there is a warning. So we're going to use something very popular. Even your Java developers will use the same thing called log4j. We'll use this log4j for logging in our Selenium automation. Then there will be a good amount of questions discussion in every topic. Then again, we can do a frequently asked questions, resume preparation. So that's from a core Selenium point of view, which is basic and advanced. But I told you that won't be sufficient unless you understand Apache, Maven, Jenkins, test-driven development, acceptance test-driven development, behavior-driven development like Cucumber, robot framework. This is basically the CIDC tool, and this is build tool. So this is a holistic picture of what you're going to learn, and we have already recently done it. Like I can just show you the previous batch that I have just done was like, this is not the only batch, but like this is the one that we have just completed, in which you have all these videos that I have done for Selenium 3.0. The same thing will be available for you in the ITeLearn website. So when you go to ITeLearn website, just for this benefit of the people who have attended late. Once you're done with your membership access and all, you will be given an access, and then you will get to see from online courses. You have to go to the recent one that I have done, that is CSDD2 and JPACT4 training online. Here you will get everything of recent. The same thing that I'm going to talk about here is already done. So in case of if somebody is in urgent, you can start going through QA live training, Selenium live training, ALM. I told you, like, I have done HPLM. So this time I'm not going to do ALM, I'm going to do Jira. But you have to definitely watch this ALM. So you can get to see through, two test management tools, Maven, Jenkins, Robot Framework, all these things. Apart from this, uh, some time back, I think just before this, I have this combination of certified Selenium development training and the job placement assistance. I started from 2, 4, and the one that I'm dealing is 3 and 5. But before that, Karthik has done it. So if you have gone to these, you will get the trainings from Karthik. So you can get to see from two different major trainers about the whole picture of how Selenium can be, used. Apart from that, we have core Selenium, basic level training, advanced level training. You can get to see all of these, and then old QA manual testing, and then there is a robot framework online trainings on using Python. Okay, so depending on your membership access, you'll be able to get to see all of these. And I'm going to cover to the in-depth of Agile and Scrum, but in case, again, I should have only done this one. So if you go and see, you'll find my detailed more videos on Agile and Scrum. So in a way, apart from regularly attending the live training, you can even get to see the existing videos, which are still important, because concepts wise nothing much changed. And then I do even, not sure whether you will have an access or not, but I do ISTQB training, so you can get from that. All right, so I want to spend good amount of time in taking questions, because pretty much from orientation session 1 and session 2, I hope you got a picture of what you're going to learn, how you're going to learn, etc. See, okay, there are two questions coming up. Let me just answer them. How about mobile testing and automation? So for mobile testing, yes, Selenium is used for mobile testing, but it is needs to be integrated with another component or a tool called Appium, which is again an in-depth course in itself. So Appium is a different course altogether, but people call it as Selenium because it is Selenium with Appium. Okay, here majorly we are going to do with Selenium with a WebDriver with the Java for web applications. Okay, so Selenium can again even use for mobile applications integrated with Appium, which is definitely not part of this. It's totally a different course altogether again. Do you have anything regarding how a cloud-based infrastructure uses automation to ensure a timed product these days? So, without knowingly or unknowingly, we are actually totally on cloud. Like for example, when I go to Git and GitHub, when we try to check in our code and everything is majorly on cloud. When I did the training on HPALM, previously we used to install the software on our local machine, which is the server side of it, client side of it, everything we used to do. And for that, I need a very good configuration machine, minimum Windows server, and I minimum need a 8 GB RAM. Then I had to install database server first, and then I had to install my the actual client and server components. Even though I'm a normal QA, and if there is no other people available in the organization, or from a learning perspective, you have to do all these things, then only the tool starts working for you. But that's the old model. So nowadays, if you see, even in real organizations, people are not, you know, people are not approving for any physical hardwares unless it's really required. It's everything through cloud basically. So the HPALM training that I have done is also through creating your instance in the cloud and start working into it. Uh, so in a way, things are mostly on cloud these days. So if I understand your question correctly, like will there be any difference when we move from a non-cloud to the cloud in terms of performance or anything like that? Or there are very many organizations through which you can actually acquire a virtual machine on the cloud and start working it also. Yes, for Appium we have a different training. Schedule, fees, duration, you all will receive an email maximum by you know maximum within, like, I would say 24 hours. Yep, this Excel sheet will be shared with you so that you can refer them and you can let me know if you wanted to cover anything. I keep learning from it. I keep learning from the market. I keep learning from what is really required from the industry point of view and interviews point of view. I keep adding it to it. If I miss anything and if you feel something needs to be added, feel free to let me know and then we can do that. Neelam, I'm not sure whether I've answered your question or not, but definitely we will be dealing with clouds as we go. Uh, Most of the infrastructure that we have and the services, software services, are on cloud. So if you're looking for anything very detailed cloud related testing, um, I don't know whether I can say that's part of this or not, but definitely various things will be taking it from the cloud. Any reporting tool will cover. TestNG will have reports. Um, Cucumber will have its own reports. No, I have not really started anything, Pooja. Again, just an orientation to give you a picture of what you're going to learn in the overall course. So if you missed, no problem. You will post this session again. Everybody will get an email with orientation 1 and today's orientation. That is orientation 2, videos links, which are anyway free. You can just get to watch them and you get a picture of it. Swati, like, we're going to definitely look at how do we generate HTML reports using TestNG. In fact, TestNG does it automatically. Any other questions that you guys have? Okay, from the new people that you're attending today, I just want to know one question because I asked this question in the last class and I got a picture of it. How many of you are like very new to software testing? How many of you are like new to automation? How many of you are new to Selenium? Or how many of you have already done some basic Selenium and looking for detailed? Detailed. I have explained what is a detail. So if you have done some previous training, then I just want to know. So how many of you are completely new to software testing? Okay. So a lot of people are not new for software testing as such, right? Let me put the other way. How many of you are new to agile? Okay, there are few people completely new. And I always keep that in mind, okay? Don't worry. Okay, that helps, Pooja. Chandini, yes, I got. How many of you are like already know Selenium? Let me take that as well. If anybody knows Selenium. Okay. And then now you looked at the kind of topics that you're going to learn. So you feel that it's going to be detailed enough, or you've already learned enough to this? Because I don't want you to. I can suggest another way, like you can start. See, one thing that lacks during the learning is practicing. So apart from attending this 1.5 hour session, I would strongly recommend all of you to at least put another 1.5 hour for the practice. I know a lot of working people on the manual testing side might not get time, but don't pile it up things for a weekend. I know we have a lot of things to do at the weekend. So okay, got it done, my. So in a way, there are a lot of people says, I know manual, I know Selenium, but again, the same point that I'm trying to make, probably that um, you did not get a chance to practice it, or then the concepts are lost, and then you want to brush it up, and then you want to go for in detail. That's exactly the fair expectation here. Even if you know, even if you don't know, I'm going to do it very detailed from the fundamental level, so both will help people who know, people who don't know. I'm just trying to get this percentage so that I'll keep that in mind. All right. So any other questions at this point of the time? So orientation session 1 detailed about what you're going to learn in manual testing. Session 2 totally detailed about what is details we're going to learn from the Selenium perspective, continuous integration, continuous deployment perspective, various other tools, etc. Even Chandini, that knowledge will help. Like she has an idea or experience on UFT, but not on the Selenium CI series. Fair enough. Okay, so let me be very clear. So when I did this previous batch, that's like just 1 month back, and nothing majorly changed or nothing changed from that time to here. It took about total of 45 to 50 sessions, including the manual and the whole picture. And it is not really a good idea to engage the people for 2 months on every time. It's not a good idea. So what we're going to do from now is kind of a live training plus a mix of video training. The whole idea is to complete in like 35 sessions. Okay. So wherever simple things are there, for example, from day 4 to day 5 here, the previous sessions are like very detailed with lots of examples on the same topic, 2 to 3 examples kind of thing. Probably in this current sessions, what we're going to do, we'll look at 1 or 2, not like 3 or 4, and then you should go back and watch the previous videos to get more and more examples. So that way, we are looking at to look at the whole picture: manual of 5 sessions, test management tool 5 sessions, Selenium 15 sessions. So it's like 25, and then we have framework developments will take about each one takes about 2 sessions. So we have like 31, and then we have 8 sessions on the CI/CD part of it, like Maven, Jenkins. Then we have Git and GitHub, robot framework, Cucumber will take about 6 to 7 sessions. So we are looking at somewhere 35 sessions. And you will always have my previous, very previously, last month, detailed out videos to look at the whole 45, or in fact, I think it is around 50 sessions. So that's the whole thing. Any other questions? All right then. So I would suggest to go back and watch orientation session 1 and session 2 by tomorrow. I don't think we'll have a session tomorrow, but by tomorrow you will get a clear schedule with the complete details that you're looking for. When are we going to start the detail out sessions? Because it's a kind of festive time in India here, especially in the south part of it. So we don't think we'll have a session on Monday. That's like either in Tuesday India time, but soon after that will be kickstart. So you'll get a complete schedule uh, with the overall learning thing, and then the fees, everything that you're looking for. Because I'm not the right person on that, just a trainer here. The team will send out with all the details. All right, anybody has any other questions before we wind up for today? Don't worry on Java, don't worry on WebDriver. We're going to deal with fundamentally using the language, learning basic examples to the advanced. All right, thanks everyone. Thanks for running it. Talk to you soon. Thanks everyone. Bye.